So today's quick little lesson is about the FOIL method. Now the FOIL method is a tool that we will use to multiply binomials together. Specifically binomials, it doesn't work for anything else except for these two binomials. And the reason we like to use it is it helps us communicate our work, it helps us have a common order, and it will help us later when we do some factoring. So the idea here is that this tool is specific for a situation just like we have here, where it's only two binomials being multiplied together. FOIL is an acronym that'll help us keep track of all the multiplications we need to do. Now, for example, what we know before is a lot of us know the distributive property, which would tell us to take each term in the first one and distribute it to each term in the second one. And we tend to go organize our thoughts like that. So using the FOIL method, it just helps us organize those in maybe a different order, and also helps us put some words so we know what we just multiplied together. So the first thing that we're going to look at in FOIL, the F stands for the word first, ironically. So what we mean by first is the first term in each binomial. So in this case, our first term in each binomial, so the first term here is x, the first term here is also x, so our first would be x times x, which is x squared. Moving on to letter O, O stands for outer. What we mean by outer is the term, or the terms on the outside edges of the expression. So farthest away from the middle. So the outside terms here, so our outside step, or outer, whatever you want to call it. So this x here is the farthest on the left outside, and this 6 over here is the farthest outside to the right. So our outer step would be x times 6, which would give us 6x. The letter I stands for inner, and inner means the terms closest to the inside of the parentheses. So in the first binomial, closest to the inside would be the number 1, and closest to the inside in the second binomial would be the x. So our inner term would be 1 times x, which is equal to 1x. And then finally, the last letter, which is L, happens to stand for last, meaning we take the last terms in each parenthesis. So in binomial number 1, the last term is this 1, and in binomial number 2, the last term is this 6. So our last step would be 1 times 6, which is equal to 6. And to get our final product, all we need to do is add the individual terms from each step to get the final product. So if we were actually going to write our final answer, we would take the x squared and we would add it to the 6x's, and we'd add 1x, and we'd add 6, which would give us x squared plus 7x plus 6. So that'd be the final product. And again, all we're trying to see is that this term, the x squared, was our f term. Then we go see that the 6x came from our outside term. We see that the 1x that contributed came from the inside terms being multiplied together. And then finally, that 6 at the end was a product from the last terms. So the FOIL method will help us multiply two binomials together. So let's go over another example of multiplying these binomials using the FOIL method. So first we got to do the first term. So we're going to take the first in each, which would be the x and the x. So for our first stage, we would take x times x, and we would get x squared. So now moving on to the O, we are going to take the outside term of each grouping. So this is on the outside over here, and then this 4 is on the outside of our second binomial. So if we multiply those together, our outside would be positive 4, times x, which is the expression 4x. So now we move to I, which stands for the inside of both of those parentheses. So this -2 is inside the first binomial, and this x is closest to the inside of the second binomial. So if we multiply those together for our I step, we would get -2 times x, which is -2x. And then our last step for L is the last term in each parenthesis. So the last term in this parenthesis is -2, and the last term in this parenthesis is 4. So if we multiply those two together for our last step, we get -2 times 4, which is -8. And to get our final answer, all we have to do is combine all those terms from each step. So x squared can't be combined with anything else, but 4x's and -2x's would combine to be +2x's, and then at the end, we have a -8. So let's multiply these binomials together using the FOIL method. So f stands for the first term in each parenthesis, so that's going to be this 2x and this x. So if we multiply those together for our first step, we would get 2x times x, which is 2x squared. Let's move on to the outer terms for our O step. So the outside, the farthest away from the middle. So here we get 2x, and the farthest away from the middle on this side is 6. So for our outer, we would multiply 2x and the number +6, which would give us 12x's. For our inner step, we're going to take the innermost term of each grouping. So this is closest to the middle for the first grouping. This is closest to the middle for the second grouping. So our inner terms, we would multiply -1 times x, and we would get -1x. And finally, we were going to look at the last term in each parenthesis. So this is last in the first parenthesis, and this is last in the second parenthesis. So if we go ahead and multiply those together for our last, we would multiply -1 and 6, which would give us -6. So for our final step to get the product here, we're going to add all those individual steps together. So there's only 2x squareds. 12x's and -1x would combine to be +11x's, and then we have a -6 at the end. Now, a quick moment here. It is really important for us to see that the FOIL method is the distributive property. And what we know by the distributive property is the distributive property says that every term in this first grouping must be distributed and multiplied to every term in this second grouping. So the FOIL method helps us do that step by step. The f will take this term of 2x and connect it to that x. The O step takes this 2x and multiplies it by that 6. So we can see that this term, 2x, was multiplied by both of the terms in this grouping. Now our inner step, the I step, would take this term, -1, and multiply it by this x. And then our last step takes the -1 and multiplies it by +6. So what we can see here is that every term in this first grouping is being distributed to every term in the second one. Same thing with this one. Every term in this grouping is being multiplied by every term in that grouping. So just to help us with the acronym one more time, we're going to go backwards here. So somebody already did the FOIL method. Now, if somebody already did the FOIL method, what I know is that they were multiplying 2 binomials. So I need something here and something here, and then a term here and another term here. Now they're going to tell us what they got for each step. So the first step that they did, they got x squared. Now the first step comes from taking this first box and multiplying it by this first box. And when they did that, they got x squared. And to me, that probably meant it was x times x. So I'm going to put an x here, and I'm going to put an x here. Now, when we move on to the outer, they said when they multiplied the outer terms, they got -4x. Now, the outer terms come from taking this box, which to us already has an x in it, and we need to multiply it by some other box, the outside box over here, and we must have gotten -4x. Well, if one of these things is already an x, this thing here must have been a -4, because -4 times x is -4x. Moving forward, the inner terms have a product of 3x, and the inner terms come from taking this box and multiplying it by this box. Well, for our inner term, one of those boxes, we were supposed to get 3x. One of those boxes already has an x in it. So what would I put in the other box to get 3x? Well, that must be a 3. Now it does tell us we actually already have both binomials filled in. But just to double check, the last terms are supposed to have a product of -12. So if I took the last term in this parenthesis and multiplied it by the last term in this parenthesis, we do get -12 because that is 3 times -4. So what two polynomials were multiplied together to get this? Well, they multiplied x plus 3 times x minus 4.